What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now, Back to the Past. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to talk about Alice Madness Returns. I played the game for the very first time. Now, I've heard of this game for a very, very long time. My wife actually is a gigantic fan. She has the original game, at least Alice Madness Returns, not the original Alice, as well as like the art book. She's dressed as Alice for conventions back in her day, and so she's super into it. And so for me, I was like, all right, I gotta kind of jump in. I gotta see what this thing is all about. Again, having heard things here or there. The first thing I want to discuss, though, is this game just in general, taking a few steps back from the game itself. The sales, the reception to this game. Well, number one, and I didn't plan it out this way. When I beat the game, I beat this game just a few days ago. When I beat it, I checked the news, and it was the same day as American McGee when they were going through that EA thing where basically Alice Asylum is canceled. Any promise or prospect of getting a third game in this franchise that he's been trying to do for so long, EA will not basically allow it. They have the rights to this kind of universe, and they're not willing to give it to him, sell it to him, anything like that. I didn't plan it like that. So no joke, I beat the game, checked the news, saw, about the fate of the trilogy of the third game, and it sucks. It definitely sucks in playing the game 12 years later. But when the game came out, I actually need to kind of back up EA just a little bit here, because when this game came out, not only was it not received well from critics, or even, I wouldn't say there was a massive, reception from fans. And what I mean by that is this game sold pathetically. You think a game selling maybe a couple 100,000, maybe 1 or 2 million units nowadays when it's supposed to maybe do double or triple, you think that's bad? This game, in the first couple months, this game did absolutely pathetic. Didn't even cross, I think, 100,000 copies sold in the first couple years. Now, one kind of uplifting thing is with the internet and such. I would say easily this game is more popular now than it ever was. Videos on this game that kind of dissect the story, dissect the enemies, dissect what this trilogy kind of means, because you do talk about Alice Asylum. They're getting millions upon millions of views. More people are watching videos on it's not why I'm making this video, by the way. I don't expect to get that. But these huge videos, right, that kind of are all over YouTube, they're getting more popularity, more views than the game literally ever did. Now, again, though, to kind of back up EA a little bit, these are people watching it, 10, 12 years after the game came out, and it's free to watch videos on YouTube. It's free to leave a like. It's free to get videos explaining the story of Madness Returns to 2.8 million views. I know that because I just watched it to kind of make sure I was up on all things, of this game. It's easy to do that. It's not easy when you're charging people money and you're saying, okay, play this game. So that brings us to the game itself. Well, how is the game? Well, I gotta be honest, I'm not in love with it as much as I've seen other people in love with it. I do think it is a solid game, but it is a game plagued with a variety of issues that I do want to get to. But let's talk about some of the game's biggest strengths first. And I think the number one strength is the atmosphere. I think Wonderland is fantastic, both from the beginning when it's really not destroyed, really not like going into madness, right? All the way through. I think literally going through these levels is the best part of the game. I would say attention to detail, like this game I would not say has aged well. I would also say it never really looked good to begin with. It's got its own vibe. It's got its own artistic art style, and I do think some of the cut scenes, I do think they kind of look cool on their own. Some of the more, storyboard moments, I don't really know what to call it, but it's mainly at like the end of chapters when everything would kind of be more flat. I love it. I think the creativity there in the art department is fantastic. And just bringing Wonderland to life in a madness, right? Literally being absolutely insane. That is this game's biggest strength. This game is nuts. This game is wild. It's pretty hard. Well, I wouldn't say hard to understand, but it's definitely going for it. And I don't think this game is like easy on people that have no idea, what this is. I think you kind of have to be, I think that's why the game didn't do so well. You got to be ready for this journey. You got to be ready for this game because it's just a very different kind of game. It doesn't hold your hand per se. Obviously, levels are kind of linear and stuff, but the game kind of demands a lot of you. And if you're not ready to put up with it or take it all in, I think this game is going to turn you off. And then that's on top of, I think, the factual problems that this game has. So, it's not all roses and sunshine. Definitely isn't like that in Wonderland either. But definitely the atmosphere, the setting, I'd say is a big strength. The music, I think the sound in this game is actually phenomenal, from voice acting to the enemies to just everything. I think literally just the eerie, beautiful music that's actually always kind of playing behind you. This game doesn't really get quiet all that often. I think is great. So I think from the sound department, visual style at times, I think this game is fantastic. I'd also say I kind of like the combat. I think the combat, it's very simplistic, right? You have 4 weapons, not too much to it. Different enemies kind of require different strategies to take them out. I don't mind it whatsoever. It definitely feels old. And that's a thing, I don't know, has that aged well? I kind of like, and I've talked about this with other games, a lot of this channel is about going to games, whether it's 5, 10, 15, however many years in the past. I like feeling it. Like, sometimes it's cool, even if they haven't aged well, it can still be a breath of fresh air to kind of go back to this era of gaming. And I like it. If you remade it, I don't know if I'd want you to change the kind of lock-on, very rigid kind of system of combat, blocking, kind of dodging. I think it's fun, to be honest with you. So I would say that's a strength of the game as well. Again, I would say some of the later levels are really fun, right? Some of the aesthetic, like the dollhouse, I would say. There's 6 chapters, right? I would really say 4, 5, 6. As you go on through the game, maybe even the beginning is. I'm a fan of water, so the underwater level is pretty good as well. One massive issue with this game is the pacing and the levels. I think they really, really dropped the ball, and that's just, it's again a personal opinion. It's my video. I get to say what I want. I think this game, it's not too long from a story point of view, right? Basically, this game is Alice goes crazy again, and she goes into Wonderland, and she finds all of the kind of usual suspects that she kind of has to bring to or do some sort of fetch quest for, and then they tell her to find the next one. That's the entirety, right? And in the background, you start to learn a little bit more about her mental state, a little bit more about the fire. I think the story that's kind of playing out mostly through the background, I think that is one of the most intriguing parts of this game. I think the base story is actually good, but it doesn't tell it to you directly. Now, I don't think every game needs to hold your hand and whisper into your ear and say, okay, here's exactly what's happening. And again, this is where this game says, we're not doing that. You're going to have to pay attention. You're going to have to kind of put up with different things if you really want the story. If you go, and like I said, I just did, 28-minute, 25-minute story explained, right? You just watch the cutscenes. You just watch somebody on YouTube explain to you what happened, where Alice is in her mind, and she thinks, the fire is her fault, and then this happens, and this happens. If you're just watching that, I think the story is very good. The issue is there's so many pacing problems where that gets spread out. Obviously, it gets spread out, but it doesn't do it all that well. So I think a lot of the story elements actually kind of get lost. Even some of the things where Wonderland mixes in with the real world with Alice, right? Some of those kind of elements and a lot of that happens towards the end of the game. A lot of it gets kind of messy because the game is so long. And now what do I mean by that? Well, the reason why I like those end levels is actually they are very short. They're very condensed. They got their different, going into the painting, and it's like a side scroller. Absolutely love that. This game actually does some very clever things with its gameplay here and there, just enough to kind of spice things up. The chessboard, kind of rearranging the individual images to make the picture, right? You got to do that. Like I said, the painting going side to side, love it. I think there's some really clever stuff there. But beyond that, it's a lot of puzzle solving. It's a lot of platforming. This game is 80% a platformer, just jumping from one place to the next. And I think some of those mid levels, chapter 2, chapter 3, I think chapter 3 is easily the longest. I played chapter 3 2 nights in a row for multiple hours and then finally beat it. I think chapter 3 is 3-4 hours of just non-stop platforming and puzzles and all this stuff. Did not like it because it's just way too long. I think the later chapters, like chapter 4 or 5, is maybe an hour long, and I was like, okay, this game, I think when it wants to keep things concise, keep things condensed, I think it actually does it really well, because there's a couple chapters in the game where it is shorter, and it doesn't let you go around for 4 hours. It's a lot shorter. I like that. When the game lets you kind of go, then you start to see some of the issues. I just don't see why you need to platform for 3 hours. They're the same kind of things. Now, they try to add elements in each chapter, and obviously the environment's different, all this stuff, and you're kind of focusing on different skill sets, right? Each chapter to kind of spice things up. But when you just do it over and over and over, and you're going from one place and you got a platform in one area, fight enemies, go to the next, do the exact same thing, it starts to get way, way too repetitive. So I would say more than anything, because the combat really isn't that bad, the puzzle solving, like it's fine. I'd say the platforming, it can get really messy. One of the things, and there's no way of like showing you this, maybe with my hand. So jumping in this game is extremely stupid, at least in my opinion. So Alice will do a thing. I feel like you kind of have to hold the jump button. So when you hold it as her first jump, she'll do like a pretty big leap. And there's a lot of sections in this game where you have to cover a lot of ground. So you need a good first jump, okay? Let's say that. You need a very good first jump. But sometimes if you tap it just the right way or wrong way, she'll do her spin jump, which is so much shorter. It's kind of like a second burst kind of jump, like that last little part you need to reach a platform. So you'll do a big jump, and then you'll do this small jump, and that's that little gap. Well, the issue there is, what if you did that small jump first? What if that is what the game thought you wanted to do? And it's very finicky. So I would say it is a mix. I mean, I'm not the most talented gamer. I would say I figured out a lot of the puzzles. Like, I knew where they wanted me to go. I knew about backtracking. I knew, okay, I need to put the bomb on this little thing to go over here to shoot this, to get the thing. I got to time it right to jump. I actually kind of walked my way through it. My wife had very little confidence. She said, well, this is a puzzle game. Which is true. You're terrible at puzzles. That is correct. You're going to probably need my help. To be honest, she was on her phone. I played the game. Maybe I looked at my phone for like a guide twice throughout just to make sure. And actually one of them, I knew what I had to do. I was just timing it wrong. So I actually, the puzzle solving, the brain gymnastics, I actually did pretty well in this game. It was more of the actual controls of Alice that kind of let me down. And a lot of it revolved around her jumping. The game wouldn't read it right. You know, there'd be some things where I'd want her to go and she wouldn't have just that little inch to kind of jump onto a platform that I wanted her to. So a lot of that stuff really hurt it. But that's the biggest thing. I mean, I really, thinking about it and talking about it as much as I am now, which is why I like making these videos, that is this game's biggest weakness, is it's way too long. It stretches itself out way too far. And that kind of hurts the overall story. That definitely hurts the pacing, because some of these levels are just way, way too long. And ultimately, you know, again, a lot of it, yes, you're in these cool environments and you're in Wonderland. I think one of the main appeals of this game is that how many games are Alice in Wonderland? How many of these do we have? Very little. How many do we have of it being absolutely insane, right? Madness. Even less, right? Very, very few of these kind of games. So I think the atmosphere, the setting really carries this game. I do think it's got a strong story. I think the characters are pretty cool, but when you have to go through as much as you do to get to them, and again, this game, when I say forgiving, like, it doesn't hold your hand. It really isn't all that forgiving. It needs you to kind of follow it. Does that make sense? It needs you to be able to tolerate this game. And again, factually, like, people didn't do it. Like, that's the biggest thing. It's not blaming people, but it is always interesting with these kind of things. It happens with movies. It happens with games. You know, you gotta take action. There were plenty of people that didn't know this. I was reading, actually, forums back in like 2010, 2011. People didn't know this game came out. Okay, so the marketing team did an absolutely disastrous job of showing this game. But it is, you know, you got to keep it in your head that all these people demanding, let's say, a trilogy and a third game. And yeah, I thought this game was fine. I would definitely take a third game. But all these people like demanding it. And I'm sad that, you know, their EA is not willing to play ball, right, with American McGee. So you have that. But this game did atrocious. Nobody played this game. So you got to be able to locate these games. And who knows, maybe this game has sold really well later, maybe. But, you know, again, just because a video, these story explain kind of things, just because they get 2-3 million views on YouTube. So while there may be some that are intrigued to get it, I think a lot of people just click, watch the video, click off the video, move on with their life. They don't care. They don't play the game. So that's just something to kind of keep in mind. A game that really was, I think, just completely overlooked and forgotten. A game that I do do think deserved more than it was obviously given, because when a game does literally like no sales, and this is like an extreme example because this game sold almost nothing, when a game does absolutely nothing and it at least has something to it, I really wouldn't call this game a masterpiece in any way, but it doesn't really need to be. I think this game is overall a very solid game, a game that I can appreciate in different ways, and a game that just was given absolutely no love or even a look, even one look at launch. So there's the journey of Alice Madness Returns. I liked it, didn't love it. I can see why people are into it. I think Alice herself is very cool. She's a great character. Love her outfits. I can see why people kind of cosplay as her. I can see why it picked up steam, you know what I mean? But I would say the game, rough around the edges. I can't even imagine it was all that great of a game to play back in 2011, and it's definitely not now. Again, gameplay-wise, like the combat, I can definitely tolerate it, and in some ways, I actually really like it, but some of the more platforms and puzzle solving, way too repetitive. Sometimes the game just doesn't allow you to do certain things. It's definitely rough around the edges, and I'm sure it was back then. So let me know what you guys think about the game in the comments. Make sure you're subscribed, bell icon turned on for more videos like this, and I hope to see you all on the next one.